That being said, we're going to jump in. There's quite a bit to cover. We'll just take about 5 minutes to give a bit of an introduction to Copilot and extensibility before we jump into what is available as a plugin ecosystem out of the box. If you are already using Copilot and Copilot for M365, there are a number of things, there are a number of plugins that you can start playing with out of the box. We have Deep, one of our senior PMs, to talk about that. We will also be talking about building extensibility, where, hey, there are things that are out of the box, but then I would like to build my own. And what does that mean? And what are the approaches available and what actually exists, in terms of the building components? We will be covering that at large during the midsection of this entire card session. We do have a customer spotlight. Really excited to have a conversation with the customer who's already built out extensibilities and it is being used in their organization. And finally, this is a question that's come up in multiple conversations that we've had with customers already. Hey, how do I qualify a scenario for Copilot extensibility? How do I understand and break down a scenario and see that it will be impactful for my organization? We will be covering that as well. Again, just want to repeat, if you have a question, you can unmute. If not, I request you to go on mute and feel free to use the meeting chat if you have any questions. Right. Everybody knows this, but I love the fact that I'm about to say this out loud, but the age of Copilots has arrived. About 6 or 8 months ago, we did a similar session on infusing AI into your team's applications, where I think we had a slide that said the age of AI has arrived. We are well into that age. It's not something that's going to happen in a few months or so. It is here and it is now to stay. And the age of Copilots has arrived. Your AI assistant at work, in terms of the different applications that you're going to be using, where it can come in and unlock productivity for you and unlock creativity for you. It is an exciting shift in terms of the way we work as individuals and also the way we work as an organization together. Somebody seems to not be on mute. I just request you to go on mute. Thank you. I do want to take a step back and talk about this Copilot across the Microsoft clouds. There are multiple offerings that we have for when we say Copilot, there are multiple products or offerings that we have. I thought we will start at that level and slowly sort of step further and further closer to what we want to talk about today. Firstly, if you are looking to adopt Copilot, there are a number of different products which come inside of the surfaces that you use today. Microsoft 365, Copilot from Microsoft 365 is what we will focus on a bit more today. A Copilot that's available within your Office applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and also some of your daily use like Microsoft Teams, which is where we're all from. And we will deep dive into that through the course of this session. But as you can see, Copilot is available on a number of other different surfaces. I would call this as the out-of-the-box Copilot. All of these Copilot come with a number of capabilities that you can start using right away if you purchase Copilot already. Now, we are a platform company, and for developers and organizations who want to go beyond what is out of the box, and you want to extend your Copilot to know more and do more, you can start using plugins and connectors. We will cover this immediately, where we will be showing you some things that are available out of the box to start extending right away. But then if you do want to build your own plugins and connectors, that is something that we will definitely cover extensively today. Really the center of the story of today's session. And of course, if you are completely pro dev and you want to create very custom and very unique scenarios and you would like to build your own Copilots, then we do have a set of offerings which starts with the Teams AI library in case you want to center your AI and Copilot experience inside of Teams. But there are other applications as well that we've built and we've offered recently to help you get started. This is the overall picture, and as you've seen, as you can see, what we've highlighted is what we will be focusing on really today. However, we will be sharing a form at the end of the session. If there are other things that you are more interested in beyond what you hear today, when you fill out the form, please let us know, and then we will definitely do a session on that. Now, focusing on Copilot for M365, I just want to touch upon this for 1 second. everybody on this call from Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft Copilot org, we use Copilot on a daily basis. And I'm not biased. I can just hands down tell you it has completely transformed the way we work, how we catch up on things, how we use it to get things done on a I would say even on an hourly basis in terms of how many touch points we have between meetings and between emails and just through the course of your entire day in terms of accessing a large amount of data and crunching it together and getting things done which are typically repetitive. Um, I will let you absorb this slide in terms of the data points that are there, but just on a personal note that this is truly transforming how we work. But what is Copilot for M365? What the basic components, if you're not aware of already, the foundationally is the large language models, which can be grounded along with the internet, which is up to date information that's available on the web, along with Microsoft Graph, which is really all of your data which exists inside of your M365 tenant, which is your emails, your chat conversations, your files, your calendar, everything around which your day-to-day activities are, and of course, the M365 applications themselves. These four fundamental components put together within your M365 boundary and accessing them through these M365 applications, you can see all the logos over there, is what really constitutes Copilot for M365. And comes with a large set of skills. I'm sure many of us on this call are already using Copilot for M365, so I don't want to spend too much time. If you've not started playing around, I would say please start playing around. Now, I want to take this back. I want to take a step back and talk about reality. Now, Copilot definitely empowers every end user. And these are not all the end users. These are a pretty small subset. But it empowers every end user in a completely different way to get the tasks that they need to complete on a daily basis. However, if you think about it, and we just saw the previous slide, the boundary that it sets in terms of what it has access to, which is primarily your data and primarily surfaced on your M365 applications, is where Copilot out of the box enables and empowers every user. But we do know that the HR team will be using a HR software which is outside of M365, or the sales team will be using a CRM that's outside of M365. Customer service team might be using an ITSM tool or a customer support tool or a ticketing tool, which means for Copilot to truly, in reality, empower every end user, it needs to be able to also talk to other applications which exist outside of the M365 boundary and outside of the M365 ecosystem, beyond your data to access your company's data and bring it into the context that you wanted to bring it in, that you want, and to complete the task that you want. So do we have that? Yes, we have it in twofold. One is all of these plugins and connectors that we have out of the box today, which our partners have been building to empower you to connect M365 Copilot with all these other applications that you might be already using outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. And of course, later on, we'll look at if you want to build your own connections and build your own plugins, how would we go about it? But I want to invite Deep, who's one of my favorite colleagues, to come in and talk about what is available out of the box. If I am using one of those really popular applications for my organization, how do I connect? How does it work if Microsoft Copilot starts to talk to it? What is the experience? Deep, if you can walk us through that.
Hey, thanks, Harish. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Loud and clear.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to kind of talk about, the out-of-the-box plugins and connectors available today. So why don't we start with, a quick video to kind of understand, like, how it works. Harish, if you could help me with the video, please.
Yeah. I just want to make sure you guys can hear audio as well.
Daniela, Contoso's Chief Business Officer. She has an upcoming meeting with her client, Northwind Energy, to mitigate ongoing issues associated with the project. She regularly uses Copilot to get on top of things, and she checks if she has her most used plugins, Jira Cloud and Contoso Billings, enabled through the plugin manager. To prep for her meeting, she asks Copilot to update her on issues related to Northwind. She gets a detailed summary of issues and hovers over the second one to get more details. She gets a rich actionable card from which she gets more information. She also finds an email from Mallory talking about a cross-border approval issue. Next, she asks Copilot to draft an email to Christy, the project lead, in a tabular format to get the latest data of the status of the item. Copilot drafts up an email, smartly arranging the tickets in a well-formatted table with appropriate column headers. Looking at the mail, she notices that both issues are on the Nordic sites. She asks Copilot to fetch her Contoso's SOP on Nordic operations. Copilot finds the SOP using the company's knowledge base maintained on ServiceNow using the graph connector, which Daniela reaches to using the references and reads up. She is now ready for her meeting, all in one go. Copilot plugins empower users like Daniela to enhance their productivity by completing their workflows across 1P and 3P systems.
Yeah. Thanks, Harish. If you can help me move to the next slide.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. So here we saw an example of how a business user can interact with multiple applications at the same time. We saw Daniela being able to fetch Jira tickets and also being able to fetch ServiceNow articles which are actually pushed through graph connectors, right? So what I want with this slide is kind of talk about a few more scenarios which our partners have built and are in the process of building in different domains. And some of this will definitely resonate with you. So let's talk about project management in ITSM. Like it's typically a lot of tasks or tickets. So imagine bug triaging, task triaging situations, preparing a list of daily reports, etc., or being able to kind of a team leader being able to deep dive into a particular tickets or tasks. So all of those can be achieved using Copilot very easily without the need for them to go to a dashboard or a console and apply 5, 10 filters and things like that, right? So when it comes to sales and marketing, like imagine the day of a salesperson starting with saying, hey, get me the list of key activities that I need to focus today, right? So that kind of um, enables the sales rep to kind of avoid going through all the emails, etc., and all of those to kind of figure out what is that they want to do next, right? In the HRMS space and recruitment space, like in HRMS, think about a team leader who is trying to schedule a shifts, right? They have to go to applications and figure out who is on leave on which date, and then kind of come back to a shifts application and adjust those shifts. Imagine a situation where they type, in Copilot saying that, hey, get me the available employees on this date on this week so that I can schedule a shift or something like that, right? And then using that information to kind of schedule a shift. It's much more easier and productive for them to do that way. And talking about legal and contract management also, typically like we're not aware like which contracts are going to expire, etc. We don't want to go into a contract, read through it, and then figure out, okay, this is the date, right? Copilot makes all those things very easy. And here, these are just examples to kind of get you started on understanding like what kind of use cases can Copilot power for you, both through the apps that our partners are building, or you can also build like specific apps to kind of which my colleague Harish is going to talk about, right? So Harish, if you can like help me with the next slide.
So Deep, in each of these scenarios, Copilot will actually have a relevant plugin to talk to
Correct.
a project management tool or a sales tool or an HRMS tool. And as a result, it's helping them complete each of these tasks, right?
Correct.
Awesome.
Great. So we already have a lot of plugins available today, and a lot of partners are also building this. So this is just a snapshot. So we can move on to the next slide. Uh, we also have a bunch of yeah. So this is basically the surface where you can go and check out the Copilot plugins which are already available today. The M365 App Store, which comes up in Teams, Outlook, etc. Like there's a filter for works for Copilot. You can just browse that section and you can enable that plugin. Let's move on to the next. So once you have enabled the plugin, so you actually need to enable that in the Copilot flyout for Copilot to kind of interact, with that plugin and get you the relevant results, right? So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. I think yeah, from there I'll hand it over back to my colleague and yeah,
Awesome.
answer.
I just want to point out something that in your team's experience today, if you click on the plugin icon that you would see within M365 chat right at the bottom, it should give you a pop-up like this and list out all the plugins. However, If you're not seeing all those plugins, it's because we might need to enable this experience for you today. So I'm going to refer to the form that we promised to share. We will drop the link to the form on the chat. And if you are interested because you already use Jira Cloud or you already use Confluence or Mural and so on, if you would like to start using these plugins because you already saw Jira in action and you want to test this for all your organization and for key personas in your organization, fill out the form, let us know, and we will get this enabled for you, and we will work with you to make sure that it starts running. And then yeah, you can let us know how it works and share your feedback. But we saw quite a few components in that video where it said there's a plugin that was created and there was a graph connector and then there were adaptive cards that came in. All of this has been built by our partners like Jira or Mural. However, if you want to build your own, if you want to create your own extensibility, and you want Copilot to talk to your in-house application and your in-house database, how would you go about that? Because these are all available out of the box for you to start using today. If that is something that's of interest to you, I'd invite Satya to walk you through that a bit more in terms of how extensibility actually works under the hood, and what are those components and how and why you should take specific approaches depending on your use case. Hey,
Thank you.
Satya.
Thank you, Harish. And can you confirm if you're able to see my screen well?
Yeah,
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, like Harish mentioned, I think you have a bunch of out-of-box plugins that you can use at your disposal. Like Deep showed, there is a Works with Copilot option where you can see in our App Store the current apps that have Copilot plugin capabilities, right? But you would also have a lot of in-house homegrown systems that you would have invested in, that you would have nurtured within your organization, that's very customized to your business workflows, your business systems, and so on. So for those, you might want to build a way to interact or get those information systems talking to Copilot. That's where I think the custom plugins or custom Copilot extensibility comes into play. In order to understand how this works, I would want to take a little bit of a overall picture view to understand how Copilot works. This might be a slide that you would have seen earlier as well, but I wanted to start here because this really gives a good picture of how Copilot works internally when you ask it a question, and then where do our extensibility fits in. When we build something where we want to extend how Copilot works, we'd want to understand first the picture of how Copilot itself works, right? That's why I wanted to start here. I'll move to this quickly because this might be a area that most of you would have seen already. If not, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me anywhere. Right. So you have this central Copilot that sits across multiple product surfaces. That's what you see here in the center. Whenever a user asks a question, hey, bring me information related to my Jira tickets, or what was the recent ticket assigned to me, right? Like these kind of questions that you ask Copilot, right? This is first sent to the central Copilot service, and that's the first step that happens. Next, Copilot will need to understand when you say me, assigned to me, who are my colleagues, like give me frequent documents that I have visited or trending documents around me. So those kind of things Copilot will need to resolve for, like who does me refer to? Who are the people that I frequently work with? What are the files, documents, emails that I have access to? So in order to do that, Copilot will have to talk to Graph and Semantic Index, where it has information around things around me, things that I have access to, and also information about me to make the results personalized and customized to me, right? So that's something that Copilot does, kind of like a prerequisite step before a pre-processing step as soon as it gets a question from the user. At this stage, in addition to Graph, if you have a plugin, if you have built something that talks to an external system, Copilot will also check, does this question need information from a CRM, right? Does this question that my user asked, does it need some information from Jira or any of the other plugins that I currently have in my disposal? So that's the thinking that Copilot does at this stage. And if it feels like, yes, I need some information from this plugin, it calls that plugin at this stage to get that information from the plugin. So in the pre-processing stage itself, the plugin, the extensibility that you build comes into play. And Copilot kind of like, it's kind of like a person referring a book in the library. Copilot refers a plugin to check for information that it doesn't know by itself, right? This is something that happens in step two. Once it has all the content, like user asks the question, it refers certain books, it refers plugins, it refers your emails, it refers your chats. Now Copilot feels, okay, I have enough information to answer the user's question, but I needed to frame it in a good way before I send it back to the user. At this stage, Copilot will send it to the LLM. So basically, there is an Azure OpenAI LLM that Copilot works with. So it sends it to the LLM, which, as you all know, abides by our responsible AI principles. So at this point in time, the LLM gets all the information that Copilot has, along with the information that your plugin, semantic index, anything else that would have provided to augment the single question that you would have asked, right? Everything gets sent to the LLM at this point in time. And then LLM sends a response back to the Copilot, which is again going into a step of post-processing, right? This post-processing that you see over here, the compliance and purview, is more from a compliance perspective. Like the information that gets sent is, something that is valid to be shown to the user. It's something that they only have access to. It abides by the compliance policies of the organization. All of that will come into play over here in kind of in a post-processing step, and only if it passes that, it gets sent back to the user as a final response, right? This is in a nutshell how Copilot works when you ask a single question. If you do not build, if you have no extensibility in place, you haven't really built any plugins, or you haven't connected any graph connectors, or you haven't enabled any third-party plugins like Deep showed, then this bots would not be there. Copilot will work within the boundary of M365, like whatever is within the M365 world, which is probably like your emails, your chat, your documents that you have in your SharePoint and all that. So it has access to those knowledge content, and it will be able to answer your questions based on whatever it knows over there, right? That's the idea. And once you see this diagram, it kind of is very clear, right? Like uh, in a real world, like I think Harish alluded to earlier, our work touches information, content, and workflows in systems outside of Microsoft 365, right? Rarely do you stay within just this boundary that you see over here. Imagine a very simple sales call, right? You might want to look up a customer in a CRM somewhere externally that doesn't sit in M365. Once you find a particular customer opportunity in that CRM, you might want to refer to your SharePoint documents and emails, which is in M365. So you're jumping from outside to inside once. And once you have all this information, you might want to build a very visual presentation or whiteboard, for which you might need a mural, which is again going to jump out of M365. So a single call with the customer, or with the customer that you would want to pitch, do a sales pitch to, you're jumping between multiple different systems, right? And I think if you have been following the world of AI, the improvements that are coming up over there, an LLM is going to be as brilliant and as useful to you as to the data and content that you provided to. So the more information that you give, you give an LLM about your business process, about your needs, about your requirements, about how your world is, right? The more the LLM will be able to customize and personalize its responses and its capabilities to your world, and it becomes that much more useful for you. Like that's where the value is, right? Like otherwise you have a standard offering, standard LLM that gives you good responses, but then it doesn't go the extra mile of being very much personalized to your world, right? That's where extensibility is critical, and that's where custom extensibility also comes in. So I think this was covered very well by Harish, so I'll probably skip this. But I think the important point over here is you have multiple different surface areas in which you can access Copilot. But behind that, you have a language model, a graph, and a set of apps that you saw in the earlier slide that orchestrates all of this in whichever endpoint you speak with. So something that you build as a plugin is going to be available across multiple surfaces for people to access and talk to. And it all comes back to the same infrastructure in the backend. So how does all of this work, right? Like I said, what users interact with, the UX layer, you have multiple endpoints. Now, within Copilot, there are a certain out-of-box things that it allows users to do. For example, right now, you can ask it to read an email, you can upload a Word document, you can ask it to summarize, you can even ask it to give a critical review. Hey, this is my product spec. do take a critical review and see if I have missed any paragraphs, any important points, any risks over here. So you can ask it to do summarization, text, back and forth, text-wise reasoning, text-wise generation as well. You can ask it to even write a poem if that's something that you are interested in. You can ask it to translate. Like you can give it a very very much an English transcript of a meeting, and you would want to translate in your native language. You can ask it to translate to Spanish, English, so any of the supported languages. So all of this language tasks, summarization, all of this is something that we call as skills. That's something out of box that comes to you right now, right? In addition to that, there is also a certain set of knowledge that Copilot has access to, right? Like I mentioned, it has access to M365 Cloud, right? So if you think about it, if you are extending Copilot, you can extend it across these two parameters, right? Like there are these two dimensions or parameters, however you want to call it. One is what it can do. So you can extend it to teach it more skills, to teach it to do more things. When I say more things, think of asking it to create a whiteboard drawing, asking it to create a presentation, asking it to create a search and find a ticket in Jira is actually a skill, right? Like it needs to understand what Jira is. It needs to understand how to search Jira. So that's a skill. So asking it to do something outside of what it has been trained to do so far is something that you are teaching it a new skill. And that's one way of extending Copilot. The other way of extending Copilot is I'm okay with the skills that you have, but I want you to have access to more knowledge or content, right? So you are imparting more files, more information to Copilot's reach. So even with the current skills, it can reason over more information data. That's another way of it's extending Copilot. Right? These are the two dimensions that we have: skills and knowledge. And let's see what are the pieces that we have to enable both these type of extensions. Right? On the skills side, we have something called as plugins. You can build plugins that essentially allows you to teach Copilot to do new things. Right? That's on the one side. On the other side, you have something called as Microsoft Graph connectors, using which you can funnel information from an external system, be it your file repository. It could be some kind of like a bunch of PDF files, documents that you have. You can funnel the information, take that information, make a copy of it, and bring it into the semantic index. So Copilot also now knows this information. So you can either expand the knowledge or expand the skills. To expand the knowledge, you go with graph characters. To expand the skills, you go with plugins, right? Now, this is at a high level, but what do these usually mean? Like, and when should I choose which approach, right? Like, that's a question that you might have at this point in time, right? Let's park that question for now. I will probably show you a few examples of what we are currently doing to build, extend Copilot with plugins and connectors, and then I will bring it all together in a summarized way. Yes, I think I see a hand raised. Arun, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I see that the graph connector is kind of enabled. Right, so now where does this actually data reside? So does this have a separate storage area that is being defined as part of the architecture, or how this plugins get integrated? So how an environment is created for each user or a set of users? So if you can cover on those lines as well, that will be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll answer your question a little bit down the line once we get into the details of how plugins and graph connectors work, right? I think that will somewhat answer your question, and then I will also come back to it. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
A
Thanks.
little bit technical. If we go into the details, not really technical, but more around how exactly plugins and graph connectors work, I think that will answer your question, right? For that, let's see a bunch of things that you can ask once you build a plugin or a graph connector, right? So this is an example of a skill that you teach Copilot. So you can have a project management plugin, you can have a bug management plugin, whatever it is. You can ask it to find you assigned tickets which are of high priority, which are assigned to me, which need to be done within the next month. Whatever criteria that you have, you can search using that plugin. You might have an internal wiki data set of documents that is not on the M365 Cloud. you can connect it using Graph Connector and then search on that wiki from a semantic way. You don't just do a keyword search. You ask it questions and then it does a semantic match and understands the meaning of your question and comes up with the responses. And you can ask it question even if the wiki is in a completely is it in English, and one of your you might have employees who are cross world, and different employees ask questions in different languages. The semantic part, since LLMs work at a semantic level, they don't care whether the question is in English, but the answer is in a different language, right? Like they are able to still match and then bring the response back to the user in whatever language that they've asked for. So that's a beauty of graph characters too. Uh, you have a bunch of options here, many of which our customers have already built. And I think you will be seeing the airline use case sometime down the line. I think Spandana is covering that. So with this, I want to take a quick demo of what it is that you can possibly do with plugins, right? Yes, I think I see Deepak's hand raised.
I hope you're going to cover how to develop and integrate the plugins with Copilot.
Yes.
The how part.
Yes, we will be talking about the working of a plugin. We wouldn't be delving into the very technical details of how to build a plugin from a technical level, but I can talk about it and how it works. I can definitely talk about it, and we can have a separate session.
Session on this.
Session on this, and also I'll share with you the guidance on how the technical details of how to build a
Yes,
plugin on the
yes,
chat as well.
that
So
will be very helpful. I mean, if you have some documents available which can help us kind of
absolutely.
create, see the benefits and the broader architecture. I mean, it's clear that what you are trying to give visibility to us. I mean, now it is more towards how to integrate
Yeah,
and use it with Copilot.
Absolutely, Deepak. We're actually already working with a few teams in your organization. But yeah, I can reach out and share more details on that.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks.
Harish.
Thanks.
So let me walk you through this example of something that Ernst Young built very recently. They had a requirement where they want to have a real-time view of unbilled inventory and unbilled invoices in their organization across different partners. It's a partnership firm, so they would want to keep a tab of how many unbilled invoices are there out there across different partners. That's kind of like how they operate from a revenue perspective as well, right? So that's something that they need a real-time view of, and typically they used to go through multiple different places, Excel, Power BI dashboards, and used to build reports on an ad hoc manner. But with plugin, this is what they did, right? Like they to get information, they had all this information in a database. So all they needed to do was ask Copilot what is the net unbilled invoices for the last etc days in Rosie. Rosie is the name of the plugin that they chose to name. So Copilot essentially uses this natural language query. So it is essentially understanding this natural language query real time. It is able to convert a form of an SQL query, and it is able to talk to a backend data and bring up the information that you see over here, right? So you have from the backend database, from wherever they have stored net unbilled invoices, Copilot is able to fetch the relevant information, bring it back in a neat format, tabled across different partners and different, it can even do across different regions as well if you want to group it by regions and so on. So they are able to see the top unbilled invoices, and you have an adaptive card that comes up over here to show this view in a very quick summarized manner. You can also adaptive card buttons. I think you might all know how adaptive cards work. Clicking on a button, you have a pop-up where you can see more information. You can see the entire list of unbilled invoices over here in a more detailed view. In addition to that, if you want to see a little bit on the trend as well, you have another button for that. So this is something that EY wanted to have as a quick action here, but it completely depends on your scenario, what you would want as a quick action, right? They'd also want to delve into trends, not just asking for unbilled invoices. So that's also something that Copilot is able to synthesize from the backend database. It's able to understand across 0 to 30 days, 60 to 90, what are the different invoices that are available. And since they have plugin logic in such over here, right, can create a dynamic chart on the go and give it back to the user, right? Like this was something that they had to manually drive ad hoc in an ad hoc fashion whenever the leadership wanted it. But now Copilot was able to give it in a matter of minutes. And the beauty of this is they can, if you see many of the terms over here, net unbilled invoices, NUI, that they talk over here is internal EY parlance. Like it's not a common knowledge for Copilot. So essentially, by building a plugin, you are teaching Copilot to talk to an external database, understand the internal, lingua of EY, and then use that understanding, use the database to actually give valuable information back to the end user. Yes, Deepak.
Satya, say in this case, you asked a query and the co-pilot was able to kind of give answer to that specific query. My query is if I'm asking to give me the revenue breakup of various verticals, that's my state query. Okay, that's going to give me say A, B, C is the verticals and this is the revenue. Statistically, there could be other dimensions to that data. Is Copilot gonna kind of bring that recommendation to the user, or it will be dependent on the query again, which will be
Yeah.
fired by the user? I
So
mean, I'll take one more example. Say if I'm saying that give me the revenue breakup of A, B, C. Okay, then the recommendation should come out that a box and whiskers plot can be brought up, which gives a visibility of the range along with the mean and the median average, because this is what the leaders are gonna look for that data. So is that recommendation, I believe, comes out by default from Google, or sorry, Copilot. The user doesn't have to kind of give these dimensions.
So I think at this point, I think it'd be good to understand a little bit on how this exactly works. Right? Like what you saw is kind of like the end user experience. What happens here when this gets done is essentially a plugin is a way to talk to an external database, like I mentioned. When a user asks a question to Copilot, Copilot determines it might have multiple plugins. You might have a plugin that you have created for CRM. You might have one you created for your ticketing agent. You might have multiple plugins. Depending on the intent of the user, it matches to one of the plugins that Copilot feels is the right plugin to answer your question. So there is a little bit of LLM magic going on over here. So depending on how you have described your plugin when you have built your plugin, the user's intent is matched to one of the plugins, and then that plugin is called. Once the plugin is called, essentially what happens is Copilot is opening a real-time window into a backend system. The plugin is the piece of code logic that you write, or ISV, who built the plugin. Like for example, in Jira, Atlassian would have written. So it's essentially a window that calls a REST API to an external system. This REST API could be to a CRM, it could be to a database, it could be to whatever external system that you'd want to link to. It could be to a patient database if you're a hospital, right? So essentially, you are converting a very unstructured natural language query into a REST API call, right? So once you have the REST API call done and the responses are returned back to Copilot, depending on how the Copilot has an LLM, like I mentioned earlier, it has access to an LLM. So it can do simple manipulations of data. Like for example, you can ask it to give me the response in the form of a table. In this table, can you also let me know yes or no for certain column, depending on the value that you got from the REST API response. So it can do simple text manipulations on that. If you want to build complex charts out of the response, that's something that your logic will have to handle within the plugin that you built, right? So if you feel like certain type of information response would benefit from showing a bots and whiskers plot, then that's something that we will have to write in the plugin business logic, so that those responses, whenever Copilot detects, okay, this is the response that I'm getting, then it will probably be able to call a function which creates a bots and whiskers plot for that particular response. So that's the way it currently works now. And this is also because you might have noticed LLMs in general are great with language and text. It still struggles a little bit with the complex math, coming up with charts and so on. So that's a part that we still have to handhold a little bit at this point in time. Who knows, like when GPT-5 comes up and more LLM, advancements comes up, we can even give a simple prompt, create appropriate chart that will help the user understand this information. Maybe that line would be enough in the future, but as of now, it needs to be a little bit more deterministic, right?
Okay, thanks, Satya, for your detailed response. Appreciate that. Thanks.
I think I see another hand, Ruksha.
Yeah, so extensive to deeper question basically. Now, as per my understanding, this Copilot has a multiple plugin based on the a question it identify the plugin, then we call the backend service, right? So it might possible that the information that the user is looking for, it might be sitting in the multiple tables.
Mhm.
So how that uh, Copilot identify, okay, we have to join these tables and get the detail. Uh,
Oh, okay, multiple different tables. Got
yeah.
it. So Copilot does not really know the different tables and all that. You can actually you can actually build the plugin so you surface the table itself to the Copilot, or it's typically you have a couple of approaches to do this, right? One, uh, you can give, hey, this is what my table structure is. I have one, two, three tables. Each table has these many columns, and each table talks about this. This is the information in table 1 to 3. I'm giving all the tables information to you, and this is what the question is. Create me an SQL query, right? That's one thing that you can do. So you're giving everything to Copilot to ask you to do the creation of SQL query itself. In that case, since it has the schema and everything, it will be able to create SQL queries. But however, currently with the state of LLMs right now, your SQL queries could be accurate, but if it's very complex queries with a lot of joins, with a lot of calculated columns and so on, the queries might not be accurate as well. So that's something that we do not typically recommend having Copilot itself create a query. What you can do instead is you have an API where you have a set of queries that you can perform, where you have a way to convert parameters, REST API call to an SQL query. Most of the modern database structures like Azure SQL, all of them have a REST API endpoint. You call the REST API, it converts into an SQL query and queries the database and brings back the responses, right? So that's possible in many of the modern databases right now. So think of plugins as a way to pick an external item from some place and bring it into the fold of an LLM, right? That's the way to think about it right now. We are coming up with more ways to kind of even do handover to an external agent. Like you might have an AI agent which is brilliant at creating SQL queries. So you might want to have Copilot hand over the responsibility of creating SQL query to the external agent and then wait for that to complete and then Copilot resumes. That is a possibility, that is a scenario that we are working on as well. So when that comes up, you can work on more complicated queries with multiple joins too. I see one more hand up.
Yeah, and we have
Harish, do
one
we
more
have?
from, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this might be the last one because we have content to cover. Mohan, we see your hand up. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I've done that. Are you able to hear me? Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Shraddha. So basically, in previous answer, you mentioned IHG. So since Copilot is completely on over the cloud and it pass data to Copilot as well as other services or the plugin we used. So so assume that we are a part of one project where we have to convey the IHG team how this tool is I mean there won't be any concern about data governance or how this tool is compliance. So what are the, I mean, is there any, document or, any things we can refer here and, share, and that can be shared with the IG team to get, the go ahead from them?
Harish, I think, would you want to take this up, or if you have a Copilot C as a team?
Trying to see who from Copilot is on the call here. But Mohan, I can take this offline. No, thanks for your question though. I'll reach out to you
Okay.
directly. Yeah,
Okay, great.
sorry,
Thanks.
we just have to get back. There's plenty to
No,
cover, and we've got
thanks.
about
Yeah.
40-ish minutes left.
Don't worry, I think we have around like 50 documents for you. You can show comfortably. It's just that, yeah, we want this to be focused on the
I mean, this
extensibility
question is
part of it.
mostly,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I think security is definitely a huge topic and it deserves its own session in its merit. That's why I think we wanted to focus a little bit on the extensibility, how we can extend it. And security is definitely a valid thing that you would want to ask, and we can take it up separately. I think Harish might even be able to post something on the chat if possible, or follow up later on as well.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Thanks.
Sure, thanks.
Awesome. I also want to sample, right? Like, and this is a sample that's available on I would want you to all take a look at that sample as well. And if you have developers, you have free time, feel free to set it up in your own tenant and see. This is a very interesting sample. You have an inventory system. Imagine you have an inventory system in the backend, and you'd want to ask questions about the inventory system from Copilot, right? So in this case, there is a Northwind inventory system which has inventory on different products. It's a retail store. So it has inventory on different products that you sell in a typical retail store, and they would want to check which are currently low in stock because there is an upcoming sale season coming up. So they'd want to replenish the stock, and they would want to generate a report generate a report to the supplier on things that are low in stock. And if you see this part, right, and I want to add a column to show using tick emoji, right, for products with the compliance level is not there. Like basically the reorder level is not compliant with the org's compliant policy, right? Pay very close attention to this part. So I think I think this answers one of the questions that was asked earlier. You see here, the response here goes through all of the different points that I mentioned over here. First, it calls the plugin to get the items which are low in stock. So these are the items, and these are the suppliers, and this is the units in stock that are currently there. So it brings up the items which are low in stock for that particular product. And then it also says the reorder level. Now, if you see, with the emoji that we have provided, it has taken that as a queue, and it is formatted in the way that we want. Like this was not programmed or coded anywhere. Some other user might want it to be represented in a different way, and LLM will be able to process it in a different way, right? So you have some flexibility, freedom on how you'd want to interpret the response that you get back from the database. Like this is what I think we talked about from a charting perspective as well. As of now, you can do language manipulations. I'm sure like once the LLM gets really strong at math, you can even ask, I want this to be in a certain bar chart or pie chart, and Copilot will be able to build it dynamically for you, right? But as of now, right, like what you see here is not just talking to a database in real time and bringing back this information. It is also able to talk to a Word document, which is basically the MOQ policy at Northwind, and compare that Word document in real time to the reorder level, and bring up that information and compare it with the database table. So it did two different things. One, it took the database content, and two, it took a Word document and compared the information in both to see if the reorder level is compliant with the MOQ policy, right? And I think this is, we have a public YouTube video where it talks about this. I have the reference for that as well. So essentially, if you click on the reference over here, right, that you see in here, you come to here where there is a Word document called as Northwind Minimum Order Quantity Policy. And this is not even something that was referred to in the original prompt. Copilot knew that there is somewhere in my semantic index that talks about the minimum order quantity, and that's what the user is referring to. So it was able to get that Word document and compare it with the information that it got from database and provide you with one single view. So this is an example of what I mentioned earlier. It's not just one system. Copilot kind of like creates a plan when you ask a question. Okay, I need to first do this, then I need to compare it with something that I knew from my knowledge. Then I need to summarize this answer for the user. So it's almost thinking like a intern or a human that you have in your team who does all this, kind of like planning for a simple question, or probably in this case, a loaded question that you might have. Uh, some other things that you can ask the same inventory database is basically you can ask it to, give me the reorder levels and so on. And once it gets the response, okay, same one, yeah. So what I wanted to show, another powerful feature in Copilot plugins as well, is essentially once you ask a question, it comes back with a bunch of responses. That's great. You are able to get a summarized view. But if you notice the references over here, right, you can hover over them to see where exactly it got this information from. These are received from graph connectors. These PDF files are ingested using graph connectors. And you might have some references which resolve into adaptive cuts, right? Like Deep showed earlier from a Jira adaptive card, you could update the Jira ticket and issue. You can assign the Jira ticket to someone else. Whereas in this adaptive card, you can see information on what inventory product is available, what is the price and whatnot, blah blah, like typically what you would need in a retail context. And if you feel like something is low in stock, you can actually update the stock, restock it. All of that workflows that you'd want to do, you can do directly from here. So with a single click of a button, they can do a restock level, and they can even draft an email to the supplier. Hey, I made a restock for this. Could you send this ASAP, kind of thing. You can do a draft of an email to the supplier right at this point, and Copilot will be able to do this. The beauty of this is none of this is coded. Since it's all out of box Copilot magic, you don't have to code anything in regards to drafting an email, in regards to representing it in a certain format. All you need to do is give it a REST API for it to talk to your backend database. The rest of it is LLM magic, right? At this point in time, you see just the copy button over here, but we are expanding it to have a button called Edit in Outlook, where at this point in time, the drafted email, when you click on Edit in Outlook, will open in Outlook and it will hand it over to Outlook's Copilot, right? Uh, so we covered plugins and we talked a little bit on graph connectors as well. I spoke about plugins as a kind of like a real-time way to open a window using REST API. Graph connectors differ from plugins in the sense where we had PDF files that showed up earlier, right? Graph connectors are slightly different in the way it works. It's not real time. Like essentially, uh, graph connectors are kind of like creating a funnel, creating a pipeline with an external world, and you determine what is the frequency of update. You determine how frequently, what interval you would want to make a copy of the external data. So essentially, graph connector will create a pipeline to make a copy of your external data and bring it into the semantic index, bring it into the Microsoft 365 Cloud. I think this was a question that was asked earlier. Uh, Plugins, since it works directly with an external database, there's no storage involved, right? Like it talks to an external system, it just brings a response back. So it's all a real-time transient, calls back and forth using a REST API. There is nothing stored anywhere unless you build it in your logic. Whereas graph connectors, it makes a copy of your external data into your semantic index. So there is a storage involved over there in your M365 Cloud. We can share documentation on what that storage is, what that's going to look like, and so on. So there is a storage that gets made with graph connectors. That is an important point to know. So you are not working with data, real-time data in an external database. You are working with the copied data.
And which is better with structured and unstructured data, Satya?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with structured data that you have, when I say structured data, I'm talking about things like tables, things that are more organized. So plugins are more useful or more accurate over there. The reason being, you would be able to control how you call the REST API. You can do filtering on it. All of that is something that you have control over. Whereas with graph connectors, it's it's fantastic over unstructured documents. So things that are a bunch of paragraphs, like policy documents that you have, things that are put together as a bunch of paragraphs in a text document, in a Word document, in a PowerPoint, whatever it is, that needs to be indexed so that there is a semantic meaning captured somewhere. So graph connector search works with a semantic match kind of like a principle, right? As opposed to plugin search, which is more of a deterministic REST API call, right? Like when you ask a question to a graph connector or to Copilot, and Copilot chooses a graph connector to answer it, it essentially does a semantic merge of your query to the graph connector information, and so it works better when you have an unstructured content over there. Right? And this diagram kind of like captures this really well. So plugins, real time, graph connectors, connects to third-party sources. It's not real time. It makes a copy, and it is fantastic over unstructured content. This is a very good view, and we'll be able to share this with you also post this call. So this is a very good view of how and when you should choose which option, right? So like I said, real time and determined by sync, that brings the data freshness quality into your equation. So when you have information, when you want to talk to an external system and you feel like that system is going to change very frequently, think of ticketing systems, think of dashboards where you want to check numbers that's going to change every day, every few minutes, every few seconds, even if you are creating a plugin to check out stock information, for example, right? So those kind of things where you would want to always have access to real-time information, and that information is going to change a lot. Plugin is probably like an ideal way to do that because it talks directly to the backend in real time. Graph connectors are more suitable for content which do not change a lot over a period of time. If it changes once in 3 months, once in 6 months, or even once in a month, it's okay. You can do a monthly refresh schedule pull using graph connectors. These are suitable for, say, HR policy documents that you'd want to bring into semantic index, or some kind of like a docs knowledge information, onboarding information that you might have for new hires. All of this documents that you don't typically expect to change like every few minutes or every few hours or something, that's something that graph connectors are probably like more suited for. Again, this is not like a, if I have static then graph connector, it's not like a binary 1 or 0. You have to consider all of these points in order to choose one over the other, or in some cases you might even choose to go with both. Yes, Anil, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You said that in graph connectors, you need to get the data and store it in M365. Is there any considerations from the storage requirement perspective, whether it is, how is the storage going to come in? Are there any databases required, structured, non-structured? How is the data storage and the data storage licenses
So
required?
yeah. So storage, in the sense, you don't directly control the storage. You don't create a database or anything of that sort. You set up a graph connector to ingest information from an external system. What happens when you ingest is it creates a semantic vectors. So basically, it creates a vectors of your system, and then it stores within the semantic index. So you don't typically have control over, I need to store it here, there, and all that. So you can just mention the content that you would want to index, and you can mention the frequency of index, and you can probably add, you can definitely add authentication. Like, I want certain content to be viewed by these many people, or this is the level of access for certain groups and so on. So you can mention the auth controls over there, or access controls over there. But that's about it. In terms of how it gets stored, all of that is taken care by graph connectors internal logic. There is a storage element cost associated with it. I think there is a good documentation on that we can share with you that talks about if you have million items that you are indexing, this is how much the storage would be for a million items. So there is a kind of like a calculation table that's there that you can refer to. So you can use that to determine, okay, if I have these many items, if I have X number of documents, so this is how my storage requirements would be. So that's something that you can use that to do the calculation. Yes, Amit.
So when we're talking about the graph connector storing the data, right? I mean, are we also talking about the metadata, which is again in line with the data which is being stored? So user one may have, access to, let's say, six knowledge base out of 10, and the user two might have only 4 or let's say 8, right? So I mean, are we also storing those kind of metadata along with the data that we are storing?
Metadata for user access, is it like
Yeah, it's just
how...
a one case I'm talking about. Let's say the user case for now.
Got it. So you can determine which data or metadata gets indexed. So depending on that, it will create an accurate semantic representation within the index as well. Authentication is taken care of automatically if your system that you are trying to index is AAD authenticated. So it will kind of like try to duplicate whatever authentication layer that you have built over there into this one as well. If it's a custom IDP that authentication that you have built in, then you will, there is additional steps of you configuring how or which items should be visible for or accessible for certain set of folks. That's an additional step that you will have to do. But essentially, that's how authentication works. So I would probably separate auth away from metadata. When you say metadata, things like say if I'm taking a proposal, but you have a bunch of HR policy documents, for example, right?
Yeah.
These documents are for India regions. These documents are for UK regions, right? So those are metadata for documents. So those kind of things you can absolutely mention when you're indexing.
So while training this and while uploading the data in the beginning, I mean, the semantic parsing will, I mean, take care of all those aspects as well.
Yes, yes, yes. You can determine. You can add that the metadata as one of the things that you need to index on. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, probably not for now, but I think I would like to cover in later sessions. I mean, where we talk about the changes, right? Because again, there is a sync aligned to it. Let's say a user changing. I mean, in this case, as you said, moving from India to, let's say, Europe region. I mean, the change in a policy. How do we ensure the sync policy and we don't, I mean, get answer obsolete responses, which is again something changed after moving to different regions. Just in case
Got it.
I'm playing. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, at that case, the graph content need not change because the backend still remains the same. The
Absolutely.
information content remains the same. If you remember the earlier diagram that I showed, when that user starts talking with Copilot, and Copilot first refers to graph to determine who that user is. At that point in time, Copilot will know,
Oh,
okay, this person has moved to UK, so I should probably check the semantic index for tagged with that thing, right? Like so that's
understood.
how. So it
The
it
grounding
gets taken
part,
care
I
of
mean,
in the
take care of
yeah
that is what you're
the
saying.
pre-processing
Understood.
step is what comes into play over there. Yes,
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much, Satya.
Hey, Satya, just on a time check, I'll probably give you a couple of more minutes.
absolutely. Yeah, I'll quickly go into the summary of this. So essentially, you have permissions management also, like I mentioned, plugins. You have it in the code. Graph connectors. It is set up when you're setting it up. You manage the permissions. Read or write. Since I think that's a very important thing that we need to cover. From a read or write perspective, since plugins interact real time with an external system, you can also update an external system. For example, in Jira ticket, you assign it to someone else, you close it. In the Northwind stock, you updated the stock. So those are things that you do real time. You can update systems as well. Whereas with Graph Connector, since you are working with a copy of the external data, it doesn't make sense to update it. You're updating a copy, so that doesn't make sense. So it's only read only. It's more useful for read only scenarios. So those are very some of the top important considerations. The others are more of self-explanatory. We'll share the slide. So if you have any questions, please post it on the chat as well, and I can take it up. I think, let me just check if I have missed anything else. Oh yeah, it's just a takeaway slide. If I have to summarize this very quickly, Harish, in 30 seconds. M365 Copilot is essentially your AI chat assistant. Think of it's a very powerful assistant which has certain information and certain set of skills. To make it your own, to make it even more powerful, extensibility is key. And if you want to extend what it can do, go with plugins. If you want to extend what it knows, go with graph connectors. And with that, handing over back to you, Harish.
Thank you, Satya, and thank you to everybody else. A lot of questions, but we're also trying to cover content. So, folks like Himanshi, sorry we couldn't answer some of those questions which are related to other co-pilots, but we'll definitely reach out to you directly and have this conversation. We saw examples that Satya showed us, but those are examples. Now we actually want to have a conversation with somebody who's built this out, and I invite Spandana to take over and walk us through this.
Thanks, Arish. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I have the Air India team with us. We have Viju and Prateek from Air India. Thank you so much for coming in, Viju. Before we start talking about, why did we go for this plugin, why the scenario, I would just like to give a glimpse of the plugin that has been built by Air India, one of the flagship carriers from India that we have. It's a beautiful plugin that is integrating with their flight operations database. And let's just look at a video snippet, which can probably give some more idea on how it works. Yeah, so basically, we have this particular flight ops database with Air India, and it has been integrated with the M365 Copilot. If you look at the questions that we are asking over here, there are various questions that the CXOs and leadership within Air India are interested to know when it comes to flight performance, like how many flights are delayed by these many minutes, from which airport, what were the reasons of delays. So just querying all of this information, having these information handy when they are accessing Copilot just makes this so much more easier to consume and get access to all those information which may be available today in different dashboards or reports outside of M365 apps. So like you see over here, you get a entire list of the question over here was to check for flights which have been delayed for more than 60 minutes in the past month. We can see a list of flights from which airport, what was the departure time, what was the delay. We see that list coming up beautifully over here. And obviously, we can take quick actions from the responses that Copilot is giving. So you can actually spin off a chat with the airport manager to understand more on what was the reason of delays. You can view obviously more details. You can go inside this particular line item and understand, get more information about this, delay that may have happened. Um, just going over here to another snippet that I have. Another interesting thing that I wanted to point out over here is that Copilot is able to identify what were the most common reasons of delay. Like you see over here, whenever a delay is greater than 10 minutes, can you tell me the top most common reasons of delay? So these are those reasoning, the text reasoning that Copilot LLM does once it gets back the response from the APIs from their operations database. And we can also ask Copilot to draft an email based on this, if it comes up. I think I'm missing out on that piece. But we can actually ask Copilot to draft an email response basis the delay reasons that have come up. And Copilot does a beautiful job of comparing the delay reasons with, if an SOP document has been shared, then Copilot does that reasoning and brings out an, email response that can be sent out to the airport managers to understand what are those proactive measures. Oh, yes, I have it now. Can you please draft an email summarizing the above information? And this needs to be shared with airport managers. What are the proactive measures that needs to be taken? So that sort of email, drafting, text drafting generation is being done by Copilot basis the information that it has access to. But without any more delay, we have the Air India team over here to talk about how did they, kind of finalize this particular scenario to go ahead with, what are their plans, what has been the experience. So we have Viju, who's the head of digital architecture, vice president at Air India. He has an exceptional experience of 25 plus years, spanning data platforms, AI, analytics, cloud, and is focusing on advancing tech platforms within Air India, focusing on LLM and conversational AI. And we also have Prateek, who's a digital architect with his team and who's also focusing on, building more on LLMs and conversational AI. So thank you so much. And yeah, Viju, just a quick question to get started with. What was the motivation or what did you want to achieve when, Air India decided to go ahead with this particular plugin scenario? What is it that you had in mind when you decided to build a Copilot plugin?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Pantana and Microsoft team for this opportunity to share our experience. So first and foremost, like Microsoft Teams is our collaboration platform, right? So anything what we built within the enterprise, if you would want like a quick adoption, it is really quick on Teams, right? If I'm able to integrate it on Teams, because all our different departments, especially the knowledge workers, are always on Teams, like collaborating and like communicating on Teams. So we would want to leverage that same platform. So that was like the one of the key motivation of building this. And like from within Teams, if I'm able to like go fetch my organizational data and then in an intelligent way, like produce responses, and then I'm able to like take action on the fly, right? As an example which you have seen shown, right? Email to the airport manager on the recent, right? So these were like some of our motivation to build the Copilot plugin on M365 on Teams.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned a great point that teams is where, your information workers are actually communicating and collaborating with each other. So it makes so much sense to bring information into the same platform so they're not going anywhere else. And Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot provides that one single chat interface where they can get information from not just the M365 apps, but also any in-house, line of business applications or database that you may be using. I think that's a
Yes.
great reason. Um, the other question that sort of kind of follows up is basically why this scenario, why the flight operations scenario? Was it a high priority one? But how did you kind of narrow down on this particular scenario?
Okay. So on-time performance, or in general, like we use OTP, is an important KPI, right, for us, or like for any airline for that matter, right? This is tracked right from like the compliance agencies like DGCA. Our board tracks this. Our CEO's office tracks this. All department heads are measured on this KPI, right? How they are contributing to this KPI. One reason of this KPI is like this is a very quantitative measure. Like people really look forward when it comes to an airline. So since this KPI is so important, right, for our top management and like for our customers, right? We wanted to start with this, right? Every department is interested in this. Every department head is interested in this on-time
Yeah.
performance current, right? So that was like one of our the reason why we started with like on-time performance.
Beautiful. So what I hear is that this is one of the top information which is requested or checked by your exec leadership and also a regulatory or compliance requirement for the industry, which is why it is so high in priority. And obviously it spans across user personas. It's something that is being tracked by department heads and not just by a few user groups, which makes complete sense. We should always go for a plugin which is obviously relevant for the most number of users, and it's a high priority, frequently used sort of a scenario or data that they need access to. Makes complete sense. Thanks for sharing that, Viju. Um, my next question would be, after identifying the scenario, and now that the plugin is sort of deployed and tested by a few users, what was the effort that you had to put in? How big was the Air India team that was working on it? How much time, weeks, days did it take for you? Yeah, I would just want to
Sure.
understand your
So,
experience
so
on that.
Sure. So I'll have Pratik talk about it, like because he was like closely associated with the team, right?
Yeah.
Pratik.
I get it. So I would say from a development perspective, broadly speaking, there are two aspects to building a Copilot plugin using the SDK route right now. So one aspect is the team's messaging extension development in itself, where like developers need to get familiar with things like adaptive cards, and a bit of bot framework knowledge would also help. And also in general, getting familiar with the whole landscape of Teams development, like how to use the Teams toolkit and how to sideload Teams apps to for local development and all of that, right? So apart from that, to go live on a technical level, what are the things that are a part of that? So that's one part of it, the Teams messaging extension development. The other is interfacing this messaging extension with the M365 Copilot. So these two work hand in hand to finally make the Copilot plugin, right? So on the integration with the M365 Copilot side, I would say that a bit of familiarity with the prompt engineering, a high-level idea on how LLMs work, how does the manifest and the responses that the messaging extension get used by Copilot to give better answers. So these are, I would say, the key aspects. And for the plugin that you saw just now, we had a team of three, one PMO, two developers. And it took us about a week for us to go to production with the first version. And I'd say that this was possible from the great support that we received from the Microsoft team. They quickly understood our background, and they brought us up to speed on what would be required to hit the ground running for us. And we didn't have to waste a lot of time because of this with all the trial and error. And we got a lot of early feedback on how to shape and design this plugin. So yeah, like shout out to the Microsoft team for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prateek. Thanks for the call out. But I think 1 week is like a record time to go from designing to deployment, at least the MVP version for the plugin. That's just great. So great to hear. Um, and I understand that what I understand is that we need some sort of, the starting point over here is to basically understand the team's platform capabilities. Like, what is a messaging extension? What is an adaptive card? How do you want the response to show up, once the user has queried for some information? Those are something which is already been existing as a part of Teams platform. Once we have that kind of a knowledge, it becomes pretty simple to kind of do the prompt engineering or understand how the manifest is going to call up the relevant APIs from your database. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's been a great partnership, I would say, with Air India to build one of the first Copilot plugins which went live in India. Thank you so much for that. I have one last question, Viju, which is that now that you have experienced the plugin, you have had a few rounds of testing done with it. What has been the feedback? What do you plan? How do you plan to take this ahead or scale or bring more use cases? Any early thoughts on that would be great.
Sure. So, matter of fact, like we have around like 10 to 12 use cases identified and is in our pipeline to build plugin, within different departments, right? Uh, Also, like, we plan to extend this OTP plugin like with other different perspectives, right? As I said, OTP is like a measure which like most of the departments are interested in one way or other. But, everyone would have like, their will require their perspective and their contribution, and they will have their own specific, or they will require their own specific views for on the OTP. So we are extending this plugin, right? That is one. Then, like, around like 10 to 12 different use cases are identified. I will take one example and explain, right? One of our team, like within Air India, that's the revenue management. They are responsible for ensuring the revenue of each and every aircraft. Like in our terminology, we call it as every tail, right? So this team normally, the scale at which they can work is like around 4, 5 tails will be assigned to an analyst, and they'll be tracking how much booking they are getting, right? We have like further details around like the complexities involved, but generally like 4, 5 tails are like taken care by one user. So with the plugin, we expect that they should be able to like go ahead and support like probably 20, 25 days, right? Especially like when we have like plans of like expanding our fleet, right? So as and when like new aircrafts come, we don't need to scale out that team, right? They can use the tool because their the kind of analytics they need is like more or less fixed, but the certain combinations are required, and which is like a very perfect tool, like to be built as a Copilot plugin from Teams. Right.
Great. I think we already have the next scenario in place for Air India with revenue management. Yeah, that's a great use case. It is basically improving efficiencies of your team who's already taking care of, who's already looking at bookings and revenues, as you mentioned. Yeah, that's a great one. And I think we can take it up as our next plugin for Air India. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Viju. As always, it's a great pleasure and a great partnership to work with the Air India team, and we'll continue to collaborate more so that Air India gets more and more value out of the Copilot investments that
Sure.
they have
Thank you.
done.
Thanks a lot, like for all the support and collaboration. Thank you, Venkata.
Thanks. Thanks, Viju. Thanks, Prateek.
Thank you, Viju.
All right. talking about scenarios, I think that's a great segue to come to our next section, which is now that we know what Copilot extensibility is, how can we have different build approaches to kind of extend Copilot to your in-house line of business data or apps? What are the sort of scenarios that you should think of when you're kind of trying to build the first, second plugin within your organization? We've seen this slide, before. It's basically the different personas that you may have already given Copilot access to, or you are thinking about giving them Copilot licenses access. We have to understand who are these top users of Copilot within your organization, and what are the different data points or information that they need access to in their day-to-day work. Just giving an example over here, if we take the example of a sales executive, we have to first understand for that particular persona what are the top jobs or what are the top daily hygiene stuff that the sales persona needs to take care of. Just giving a few examples over here, it could be for creating some sales proposals basis whatever conversations or archives are present for a particular lead or for a particular customer. What sort of opportunities or solution ideas do they need to come up with basis the work that they have done in that particular department or in that particular function? Just putting all of that together and creating some great stories and presentations. That's something that is done day in and day out by sales teams. And obviously to have a very engaging and fruitful conversation with the customer, they need access to a lot of background information about the customer, about the solution, about the proposal. So having information access, being able to spin up creative assets or docs or presentations, and being able to access historical conversations or information that they may have about the work area or about similar customers is something that this particular persona would need help with. And if we can just understand what are the pain points that go behind each of these jobs, it can kind of help us to narrow down what sort of scenarios or use cases should we think about. So for example, if it's for creating sales proposal, it is basically being able to help them to spin up creative assets or presentations. If it is about understanding what sort of agenda points should they cover when it comes to a first conversation with a customer lead, then it's basically helping them being more productive, getting information or giving them information in just a few queries or clicks on the Copilot chat interface. So we need to first understand who are those top personas within your organization who have access to Copilot today. After narrowing down to a few personas, we need to understand what are those top 2 3 jobs or data or information that they need access to in their daily lives, and what is the problem statement that we are trying to solve with them. Once we have those finalized, it kind of comes down to the third point that you see over here, to understand what are those questions or queries that this particular user persona is going to ask to Copilot. That's very light, high level prompt engineering. Meaning, if it's a sales persona, is it like, can you bring me up information about XYZ customer and any work that we may have done around IT infrastructure projects in the say for example retail industry. So Copilot is going to take up some of these parameters like the industry, the customer, the function or department like IT infrastructure, and it's going to query information about all of these parameters and give it back so that this particular user persona understands or gets the most value from the Copilot chat interface. And obviously it's just a way of thinking how what sort of queries are these personas are going to ask, and accordingly finalizing what sort of integrations or workflows do we need to think about if this is the target persona that we're going to do the first plugin for. um, yeah, so just to wrap up just a few questions for you to start thinking of when you have when you're thinking of scenarios for plugin. The first thing is obviously to understand what is that problem statement that you want to target. What is it that is a problem right now with your existing database or your existing information system, and what is it that you want to change or improve? If you think an integration with Copilot is going to improve certain things, what is it that we need to target? Post which, obviously, we need to understand who are those stakeholders or who are those user groups who are going to use this plugin day in, day out, and what are their top pain points, what are the top things that they're going to do, and what are the most commonly asked questions or needed information for these particular personas. Uh, Basis which we are going to design that these are going to be the user queries. This is how the manifest is going to understand the parameters that a user query is having, and pass those information to the REST APIs to get the response back accordingly. And obviously, Copilot LLM does its bit of magic to manipulate the text or to generate any text to give it a nice, beautiful format so that it's easy to consume. When it comes to tech considerations, we also need to understand what is that external system. Is it a structured database? Is it a docs repo, unstructured information? Is the information going to change very frequently or not? Everything that Satya touched upon on his final slide. These are some of the checkpoints that we need to have in mind when we decide to go for an integration scenario, and what sort of existing limitations that they may have, or if you have REST APIs in place, or do we want to build those APIs so that we can go ahead and build your first Copilot plugin. And yeah, once we have the plugin, it's always good to have some clear metrics that this is going to help us improve. Could be the business outcomes or problem statement that we started with, but it's always good to have that in mind, that what is it that Copilot plugin extensibility is going to help me with. Yeah, so these are some of the pointers that could help us think about, the scenarios when we decide to build a Copilot extensibility solution. With that, if there are no questions, then we can move ahead.
Thank you so much, Mandana. I think this is a really solid framework, something that we've used plenty of times in the past for building plugins for other organizations, on building plugins with our partners. So key areas, I've actually left a screenshot in the chat. This is something others can sort of look through immediately, copy over. We will also be sharing the deck and the recording for those interested. You can look through. Actually, even this slide is is something that you can take a snapshot of, depending on the scenario and depending on the persona, how you can match across to really imagine how extensibility scenarios will play out for your organization.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
just
much,
a
Mandana.
sample, just a
Yeah,
sample use case, to think about. Yep.
awesome. But yeah, I would say this is a good, I would say it's a guideline or a framework, at least an art of possible to help you start
Yep.
thinking in terms of, how you can then reimagine the same for your organization based on the tools or applications with which you want to connect Microsoft Copilot. Thank you. This was just so much that we've covered. I do want to thank everybody who've been with us the entire 90 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us.